Okay, everyone, we're doing another HAF Reacts video. We'd call them Respond, but that doesn't really fit with the logo. It's way too big. We're here to talk, we, meaning Suhag Shukla, Executive Director of HAF, and Indu Viswanathan, Indu, how do you describe yourself? We've worked together many times. You've done some podcasts for us. You work in the education space broadly. Can you just introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. I would say I'm a scholar at large right now, for reasons that we'll actually discuss, I think, during today's podcast. But yeah, author, scholar at large.
Great. And we're here to talk about an event that was at Rutgers University yesterday that I was at. Let me just bring up my screen. Where's my screen sharing? Apologies, everyone. I am still figuring out this new thing we have here. I'm going to share my screen with this event that we're at, HAF was at in spirit and me physically, this event at Rutgers.
There's
Hindutva in
gonna be a
America.
bonus for you, Matt, for doing that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Is there? That would be lovely.
I don't know,
Uh,
at least one of the heart, maybe not one of the wallet.
you know what? The wallet makes more sense to me these days. It was it was for at by the Rutgers Center for Security, Race, and Rights, called Hindutva in America: A Threat to Equality and Religious Pluralism. It was at the campus in New Brunswick, and it was headed up by Audrey Truschke, who we've talked about, and in full disclosure, was involved in a defamation suit that HAF brought against her and some others about some nonsense that was said about us. Sahar Aziz, she was the moderator, and the Rutgers Anti-Caste Collective, who declined to actually show up in person, even though they were scheduled to be there for some reasons. I'm not going to go into those, and let's skip over their comments at this event in the interest of time. But bringing it back, let me stop sharing my screen here. So this event was about this report that this center at Rutgers put out about Hindutva in America, which basically maligns, safe to say, every major Hindu organization in America as being far-right extremists, Hindu nationalists, and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to talk about that today and
Including
talk about
student groups, right? Because
including
there's
student groups.
dangerous Hindu-American students on campus.
Yeah, to get into this, so there was a heavy security presence at this event. There were multiple cops, body armor, weapons. There was also regular security. And although Professor Truschke, said at the event offhand that this was about her and the event, I specifically overheard. I was one person away from a cop telling another student who asked what was going on, why are all these people here? And he said, this is just what we do at events. It's a sad state of affairs that in the United States these days that there have to be armed cops and metal detectors to show up at an academic event, but that's where it is. But it wasn't about her. And let's see, what would be useful? I mean, I gave you the overview of the event. Do you think that'd be useful for listeners or how we get into this, or how do you want to go on?
Well, on that note about the armed security, I was just glancing at the 2026 fire rankings for Rutgers right before we hopped onto this. And Rutgers has
Just for people to know, fire is what? Not everyone
fire.
knows.
Oh, not everyone knows. Okay.
Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression.
Right. So every year they conduct surveys with thousands of students to find out from the student perspective what their feeling is about things like academic freedom, etc. They also assess speech controversies. So out of 250 colleges and universities that FIRE ranked for 2026, Rutgers ranks 236. They dropped 38 points or 38 spots from 2024. So their overall grade is an F. And interestingly, so I dug into what are these speech controversies. So this means any sort of notable incidences where free speech was tested on campus, from speakers being deplatformed to administrative actions, etc. So there were two incidences that FIRE brings up. One is in 2025. Someone was scheduled to speak at a virtual mini conference on HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, featuring HBCU presidents and experts, and the university canceled the mini conference after President Trump issued an executive order restricting the use of federal funds. So there was one that was canceled specifically because of a Trump order. The previous event that was canceled or deplatformed in 2024 was the university scheduled a town hall event so students could ask the university president, Jonathan Holloway, questions. Before the first question was asked, pro-Palestinian student protesters began shouting over Holloway and the other students in attendance. The chants included "Globalize the Intifada, long live the Intifada." Holloway was escorted out by police minutes after the shouting began. Police then escorted Jewish students in attendance out of the event. So I just thought it was relevant to this conversation to not just raise, specifically the fact that Rutgers, the students' comfort in expressing ideas as a D, students' a sense of openness on campus to ideas as a C minus. Students are self-censoring. They received an F for self-censorship. Students received students rated administration with an F for administrative support and rated it an F for political tolerance. So these are very alarming, very, very alarming
Well, and
results.
you can also see that events like this that demonize organizations on campus, these students are going to, I don't know if there's anything lower than an F, but that's where it's going to push at least Hindu American students who might be associated with these groups, if they even withstand surviving. It's hard enough to keep, remembering from my college organizing days, it's hard enough to be involved in extracurricular activities, especially if you have goals beyond undergrad or even career goals or grad school goals, whatever it is. It's hard enough as it is to organize. And then when you have a faculty member demonizing, actually calling on the U.S. government to investigate and potentially keep you out of the country. And let's not forget that many of our, or probably most of our college campuses have international students on them, and they're already under the radar and fearful. And so now you have a standing faculty member who's worsening the problem. The other thing is that for her to say, oh, this is about me, it's quite on brand, right? All her scholarship, everything is about Audrey Truschke. Whether it's, she's written a blog on how her personal religious beliefs have no bearing on her academic work, that she has been put under stress or under threats. It always comes back to her. And she actually shows all of the characteristics of a narcissist. And so just in the way that she behaves on social media, certainly there are academics on social media, but she takes her wanting to poke at people and to attack entire communities to an entirely different level.
I mean, that's the role she's playing, right? It's provocateur. And
Absolutely.
and Matt, I think you'll get into this more when you talk about what you heard, but her entire shtick is to provoke, and she anticipates the reaction. She's waiting. She wants the reaction. That's what she's looking for. I think it's almost this perfect storm of real issues with academic freedom, as we can see coming from both sides of the aisle on campus, that are shutting down actual viewpoint diversity and actual expression of perspectives that people just can't seem to. They have no tolerance for this. We're not the first people to talk about this. There's a lot of issues right now happening across campuses in the way classrooms are being, or universities are being run and students are being taught, where there's just been this concept creep around things like violence or oppression, where even the way someone looks at you is perceived or is registered as violence, right? So the very space where we're supposed to be questioning our ideas and questioning the ideas around us has become a place where your set of ideas that you have is been captured by this concept of morality. And so you're considered an immoral actor if you don't believe what I believe. And therefore, we can't actually have a real conversation about this, because the act of you questioning what I'm saying is not only a moral act, it's violence to me. So she's feeding perfectly into the zeitgeist that's already existing and being encouraged in many ways on campus, which is, the university of all places, I would say of all American institutions, is the place where we're supposed to be able to question anything. And as educators, as a professor myself, I've signed up to have my ideas questioned. That's part of it. I haven't signed up just to have my ideas like sort of internalized and obeyed. That's what I've signed up for. I'm an educator. I'm not just an expert.
I think the academic freedom thing is particularly interesting because I think, at least in her case, and from what I saw yesterday, there's a strong element of gaslighting going on because it started with this thing about academic freedom and a boilerplate statement. We're committed to academic freedom, discussion, open discussion, and all these things. Yet when I actually spoke to her afterwards, very briefly before she told me goodbye, um, what I asked her, why don't you debate these things? What can't we have a discussion about this? She refuses to engage with us at HAF or any community member or any even academic that disagrees with her on these subjects. I have yet to see it. I have put it to her through proxies before people we know in common. We'll have a debate with you. We will talk about these issues in a public forum. It doesn't need to be a debate per se, but it can be a conversation. And she doesn't. She presents her conclusions as settled fact. And even I overheard her say to a student, one of the few there afterwards, he was asking about Aurangzeb. She's written books about him. Her area of expertise, as it is, prior to talking about Hindu nationalism, is the Mughal Empire. She's written books about this. This is her scholarly background. But she told this student, and I'm paraphrasing, so if she listens to this, if I get something wrong, I'm sorry, I'm just doing this one from memory, that no scholars think that Aurangzeb destroyed Hindu temples, or not to any significant degree. She said all academics agree on this. We disagree on a lot of things, but all academics, there's no debate, who study this think this happened. So that's just the level of presentation. I think she plays fast and loose with the facts sometimes. So I'm going to jump into one of those fast and loose with the facts because this is something that we at HAF dealt with. And Suhag, you can enlighten us. She actually told the people there that Rutgers had added caste protections to their university policy, which is false.
Right.
They actually sided with, correct me if I'm wrong, the position that existing policy already covers it. Suhag, is that correct, Indu?
That is my understanding from the last time I looked at this issue. I do know the Rutgers Union, which is not surprising because there's been, concept creep in the unions. That's probably where it all starts, quite honestly, where they may have, but the university absolutely has not. But I will double check on that. But at the same time, I will say that a court has found that she has made verifiably false statements. So it wouldn't be surprising. The same way that she said that, oh, the security is here because of me and because I'm in danger. She likes to maybe fly fast with facts. So
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I mean, I'll just add to it's the hallmark of a scholar, of an academic is, and we're often accused of this, is kind of hedging and not saying this is for sure, but according to the information I have, to the best of my knowledge, this is what we believe to be true at this time, right? We don't really say, and this is true across, I would say, both the quote unquote hard and soft sciences, right? And I think we all can probably think of examples where the best discoveries were made when people questioned what they thought they knew. And so the scholarly disposition is not to say, well, this is academic consensus, therefore don't question it. But hold on a second, there's academic consensus. Maybe this is something that we should question.
Actually, just real quick, going back on to the title, that Hindutva is a threat to equality. I believe that was part of the title. For her to be championing a policy on college campus that's going to treat South Asians differently, unequally than every other ethnicity or race on campus, I think we need to ask, what is the real threat to equality here?
I think that's a good question. These are supposed to be short, so in the interest of time, I've got notes of some statements here that I'd love to get some reaction to. We'll skip over the part about where she repeats some, frankly, lies about HAF, that we get money from the Indian government or we collude in any way that would require us to register as a foreign agent. Not true. But she said, Hindu nationalism is fundamentally anti-Muslim. Quote, it's not a bug, but a feature. Its purpose is to intimidate Muslims in the United States. Yes? No? Thoughts?
I mean,
Where?
can we just have like a degree of absurdity meter, like an absurdometer or something? Because I think that
I'll
would
put it on
be
the bottom.
probably
Well,
more
that would be a
useful than a
good
yes or
feature, Matt.
no.
Yeah.
Absurdometer, I would say that ranks pretty high.
Okay, let me give you another absurdometer. I'll skip down in my notes. She said Hindu nationalists engage in anti-Asian hate.
all the time. All the time. I have posters right here in my basement along with my Hindutva trolls. Anti-Asian hate. That's what we're all about.
Indu, what do you think about that one?
I mean, obviously, that's what my whole life has been about.
Anti-Asian hate. Wow.
Oh
Interesting.
yeah, 100%.
Okay. Let's see. She said something, this is a paraphrase. Hindu nationalists don't want to educate Americans about Hinduism because if they did, they would partner with her.
I mean, Matt, do we even need to say anything?
Yes,
Like
we
that?
do. Indu, this is social
Okay.
media. This is social media in short clips. We have to be punchy and,
Okay. Well, I mean, this is this sort of endogenous cycle, right? It's like everything about Hinduism is bad. It's irredeemable. It's oppressive. Therefore, we need to, reform it from the outside. And anyone who disagrees with the statement that Hinduism is terrible wants to maintain how oppressive Hinduism is. And so she's positioned herself, nestled herself nicely in there as an expert. Either, do you believe what I say, or are you a horrible, terrible, Islamophobic genocider who's getting money from the Indian government? That's sort of what she's positioning herself as.
She's also a historian. She's not a religious studies professor. So I don't know necessarily that we would want to do that. Though I will say that some of the evangelical sources that I have seen on Hinduism for the purpose of harvesting souls and converting Hindus en masse do have some pretty on point material about Hinduism. So, given her evangelical background, maybe she knows a thing or two.
Just for viewers, what is her evangelical background? I don't fully know.
There's been a lot on social media about her in-laws. They ran missionary camps in India proper. So that she has that background. Her husband or partner, I don't know the legal status of that, but he also spent time in India. Both of them, incidentally, also spent time in Pakistan on different fellowships. So you can see how some of the narratives from both of those ecosystems shine through in her activism.
Yeah.
I mean, and that statement, just imagine lifting that up and placing it with any other group in the United States. And this, this woman who represents the majority population in the United States. And there's nothing wrong in people who are white and Christian studying it. There's nothing wrong with that in general. But imagine someone like that saying, well, Hinduism isn't bad, but every Hindu American organization is terrible. Therefore, Hindus are not allowed to organize. Every Hindu American organization that teaches about Hinduism is evil and to not be trusted and should possibly be deported. So Hindus are not allowed to practice our religion, right? Every First Amendment violation. Hindu Americans are not allowed to speak about or speak against. I won't sit down with them. So again, another First Amendment violation there, right? So she's cutting through the First Amendment for all Hindu Americans and then has the audacity to say, but if you want to learn about them, you should really come to me. Imagine someone doing that for any other community. I think it would be immediately visible how completely just absurd. I keep going back to this word absurd. It's delusional. It's absurd. Delusions of grandeur. I don't think actually probably people outside of our community actually take her very seriously, because it's ridiculous. Even in the world we live in, even in the world of academia that we're living in, she is like a caricature of what's going on campuses right now.
Okay, let me back into that because there were several things I wanted to pick up on. One, on the not taking her seriously in the interest of confidentiality, I'm going to be very vague, but I was speaking with an editor, a commissioning editor at a publication in our space, and he described her as an ideologue, in terms of not taking seriously. He will quote her, but not without serious caveats and counter quotes, because he is aware that he's not an expert on Hinduism, India, or anything. This is broader, just assignments. But he's aware that what she says is inflammatory. So there's that. Then you were mentioning something about Islamophobia and other communities. I want to hone in on that a little bit, because that language specifically was used by Sahar Aziz, the moderator, talking in the reverse. Imagine if people said things about Muslims, about that you couldn't say about other communities. And we've used that language at HAF before, and I think it's true. So it's always sits a little bit odd with me because I feel like I'm on the right side of this. My head is screwed on straight and I understand the issues. And I agree with you. You couldn't say these things about other communities. But in this conversation, the same thing was said about Islam. And one of the things they mentioned, which I think is also absurd, that basically there's no Hinduphobia. There haven't been anti-Hindu incidents at all. Something, again, paraphrasing, if she listens to this, please, I'm going from memory, that all these incidents that we've seen are based on ignorance or mistaken identification. The anti-Hindu incidents don't exist, that no scholars believe that Hinduphobia is a real term. And that's that. And she said, to justify that in part was that there are Hindu organizations that say Hinduphobia doesn't exist. To wit, Hindus for Human Rights. I'm going to just tangent on this for 1 second, and we'll come back to discussing it, is that somebody in the audience asked, what are some Hindu groups that are opposing Hindutva and Hindu nationalism? She says, Hindus for Human Rights and Savera. For listeners, Savera is actually not an organization. It's an umbrella group made up of Hindus for Human Rights and others. Second time, she said, Hindus for Human Rights and Sadhana. Again, if you're not aware of this, those are the same organization. They're both founded by the same person, and they have overlapping interests and membership. So it's one organization she cites, and it's multiplied through it. So that's my little spiel. It drove me crazy because I couldn't help myself. And fortunately, I removed myself to the back of the room so my muttering wouldn't interrupt.
Yeah, I mean, that's not surprising, right? I mean, even if you dig down into some of this supposed alleged academic work that's happening, it is, I don't know if it's appropriate to use this phrase, it's a circle jerk of scholarship. I mean, that's all it is. It's the
circular
same,
citation, if you want to
it's
be.
circular
Yeah.
citation,
Yeah.
yes, for the
The PG-13 version
the
of that.
PG-13 version. It's the same people citing each other without leaving any room for any kind of dissenting perspective at all. And it's the same small group of people putting up different storefronts under different names. They're the same people who developed the field manual, the same people who, it's the same group of people doing this, circulating their same ideas.
TGH. All
Yeah.
of it.
That's
all of it's-
dismantling global Hindutva for
Yeah.
people that don't have the memory of that. That was what, 2021?
Well, Indu, you and I
Yep.
have talked about this where when you are studying, especially when you're studying minority communities or minority organizations, there's certain ethical standards that universities will require, and individually there should be some level of self-policing. I can pretty much guarantee that she hasn't talked to any people behind the organizations that she studies. So as a scholar, where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's bad scholarship. It's unethical. I mean, as soon as you get into the area of human subject studies, whether it's individuals or organizations, our government has, and in a good way, we have policies around this, right? We have protections in place to make sure that communities are not, and people are not manipulated or not misrepresented. All of these things they can be cumbersome, they can be administrative, but they exist. The purpose of them is to hold ourselves to the highest ethical standards when it comes to representing communities, acknowledging that someone with, doctor in front of their name has a certain amount of capital in society, and not just in intellectual circles, but the ways in which these things can be picked up by the media. So when someone in that position of power is representing a community who is not speaking for themselves in this case, they have that person has an ethical obligation to make sure that they're representing that group's position with fidelity. And you can't do that if you're not actually conducting any kind of member check. It's just a basic, I mean, I learned this as like a first-year doctoral student at Columbia University, the same place where she studied, right? You couldn't get past your first year without learning these things. So, I mean, I think this speaks to, she's a historian, right? She's not in a field that typically does ethnographic work, but to say she stepped out of her lane, she's like on a completely different highway. It's not even the same lane or the same highway. So like, she wouldn't have gotten this written, but I think what's dismaying is that none of her colleagues who who claim, and people in her little group who claim to stand for human rights, are pointing out the fact that she's actually behaving quite unethically when it comes to pretty basic standards of human subjectivities.
Yeah. I was going to say that, she likes to present herself as this damsel in distress. Like, look at this room. She baits, like she's putting out bait. And unfortunately, our community falls for it. This is what she's looking for. And people in the community are handing it to her on a silver platter. And I don't blame the community, because it's frustrating. It's tiring to always be put under attack. There are definitely people within the community that would be vulnerable to deportation, or to investigation, not because they've done anything wrong. But right now we're in a situation where our government has some bad actors in it that are taking the power that they have in their hand and abusing it. So taking from that position of power to twist things to look like I'm the victim. And so this is just a note to the community that we need to think through, like, don't give her what she wants. She wants the reaction. She wants a room full of uncles and aunties who are there. And I don't fault them, right? They are concerned about their children. They're concerned about their grandchildren. And I will say that the response from the community, at least from certain community organizations, has definitely gotten smarter. I don't believe any Hindu American organization asked for the event to be canceled. They asked for the administration to disassociate, which the president sent out a letter saying that they were there for students of all religious backgrounds, student and faculty of all religious backgrounds, that it was supposed to be a place, an environment that is, free of harassment. They may not have used exactly those words, but also disassociated from the event, that any event is expressing only the views of the sponsors of that event or the participants. So I do think that there's some maturation in the community. I will ignore social media, because on social media, you just get this mix of people from India and from around the world speaking up. And India doesn't necessarily have free speech in the way that we have free speech. As I oftentimes say, hate speech is free speech. So please don't tell us to sue for defamation over hate speech. That is just like a word salad. It means nothing in the legal context here.
Well, and just to clarify, India not having free speech in the way the US does, India has blasphemy laws like much of Europe does, and we don't. And that's a huge distinction. So it's not, I don't see that as a statement about any particular administration in India either.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's they have a clause in their constitution that says you're not allowed to hurt the sentiments of a religious community. That doesn't exist. That concept doesn't even exist in the United States. So when that, right, because laws help govern what we they inform what the society believes to be their rights, and for obvious reasons, and the limitations of their rights. And we just have different laws here than we do in India. And that changes the way we perceive how people are engaging with things like speech. And so when someone says, sue her because she's saying something that's hurting my feelings, to the Indian ear, you have a right to do that.
Right.
It's protected by the Constitution from the beginning, right? Whereas in the United States, that sounds like you're trying to squash someone's First Amendment rights. Ironically, when she's the one who's actually squashing our First Amendment rights.
I have, as I said at the beginning, we try to keep these short, but I have two things. One question or point to go on what Suhag said about essentially not feeding the troll and reaction, and then I'll get some closing thoughts. One thing that I think is worthwhile bringing up in the spirit of fair points she made is a couple years ago, there was a parade in Edison, New Jersey, where there was a bucket loader. It was widely described as a bulldozer, but I'll channel my son, who not too long ago got over the boy fascination with construction equipment. So I know it was a bucket loader, not a bulldozer, that had, I believe, is a big poster of Yogi Adityanath, who's an Indian politician in UP. And it was widely perceived, I think genuinely, by the Muslim community as being an affront, which I guess I do have to say, because there's the perception that the current government is bulldozing Muslim homes in particular, and the complexity of that is definitely a bridge too far for this conversation, but it was widely perceived as an affront. And I will go out and say she has a fair point. That was, to me, needlessly provocative Whether the reaction to it was on point is a different thing. Do either of you have thoughts on that? Recall that incident? Okay.
I do
Well,
remember it. And this is a challenge, I think, for the community. We have had like tripling or quadrupling of our population rapidly. And so while kind of the earlier generations were assimilating in a maybe faster pace, we haven't seen that yet. We also have the internet, so that it makes access to geopolitical issues far, far away more readily available. Um, you know, to me, it was poor judgment
yeah.
to have that. At the same time, at least that forced me to look up what is this all about. And there's facts that the buildings that were being bulldozed were not just those of Muslims in India, but of all. These were supposed to be buildings that were built illegally without permits, and
Right.
with
That was that's a part of the complexity of it. And to be
exactly.
clear, I don't know if it was intended. For all I know, somebody just likes Yogi Adityanath, and somebody had a piece of construction equipment. I don't actually think it was intended as a provocation that it was taken.
Right. But
nevertheless, it wasn't entirely thought through.
Exactly. But I will also say, though, just in terms of the double standards towards Hindu Americans, the float with the Ayodhya Ram Mandir was also seen as an affront to
it was brought up yesterday,
Muslims, right?
Yeah.
So now here is, I mean, in any other context, if we were, well, we are in the United States, if some long-standing sacred homeland of Native Americans, for instance, had been returned to them with dignity through court orders or whatever, even if there had been violence in the, say, activism towards reclaiming land, I think that would be celebrated, at least in the progressive spaces. But you have a complete double standard when it comes to the Ram Mandir, and here are people around the world, Hindu Americans around, or Hindus around the world, celebrating, kind of getting closure as a result
on a wound
of,
that is very,
right.
very, very old. The history
Yeah.
goes back literally centuries, despite
Exactly.
what the reporting would have you believe, that seems to think that a mosque sprung from this site like mushrooms coming from the earth.
Well, and I think what gets overlooked, which I think is the most important part of the story, is the convening of religious heads from both communities, reaching a consensus on, like, when does that happen in the world?
Right.
When is there a peaceful transfer back, right? In a way that both communities have consented to, and both community, I mean, like the Hindu leaders were saying, don't, be sensitive to what this must feel like to the Muslim community, and the Muslim leaders were saying this is the right thing I mean, like, that's quite miraculous and quite incredible. And instead of that being something that's celebrated around the world as a really powerful and probably historic act of truth and reconciliation, it's instead, the focus goes on to sort of the random rogue actors of violence that had preceded that by decades, instead of looking at what was happening in contemporary times, because it doesn't suit the narrative, right? This happened under a supposedly anti-Muslim administration. And so if that comes up, that seems like a counterexample. And so
even though the court case started well before this particular dispensation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
all
the
of that is just inconvenient. All of that is just very inconvenient to the narrative. And so it's unfortunate, because I think it's actually quite an incredible example of truth and reconciliation that could be used as a model.
Yeah. And we'll also ignore the fact that the head of the archaeology that showed that there was some dharmic structure going back a long time, or at least series of structures, was in fact a Muslim.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, there was something there. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't expect to get to the Ram Mandir on this, but okay. Final thought. I mean, it's there. I mean, she brought it up. I just didn't put it down in the notes because. Okay, final thoughts.
I'm tempted to say Jai Shri Ram, but that's also seen as a trigger, apparently.
It is. I mean, people think that. Okay. Indu, final thoughts on academic freedom, Audrey, any of the things we've discussed?
I mean, first I will say, everyone do your sadhana. That will help greatly. We just need to calm the senses. She's really good at all of this, the whole space on all sides of it, is really good at triggering all of our everything, our worst impulses. And I think the situation calls for us to reach deep and access our highest self. So whether that's this Hindu space that's broadly in academia, I think academia is in a crisis moment, a tension moment, but I think something good can come out of it. And I actually think that absurd extreme actors like this are very useful and illustrative and can teach us about what happens when these things go too far. So in the end, maybe she becomes a cautionary tale. And so I think if we just hold the situation with a little bit more lightness, a little bit more upeksha, I think that can really, really help us.
Suhag,
That
anything more uplifting than that?
No.
Because that was pretty good. Okay, excellent. Thank you both for joining us, and we'll talk soon.